Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's discussion of our Lowcountry Book Club Book of the Month, Come Home to Me by Liz Talley, who we have with us today, along with Grace Green, another of our friends. And we're going to have a little informal discussion among friends about Liz's book. And we're going to cover a couple of things people posted in the book. Quick mention, there will be spoilers in this discussion, as every month we're talking about the book that we've been reading all month long in the group. So if you have not gotten to it yet, you want to stop here and come back to this interview after you've read the book, because this is the talk you would have with your book club after everyone had read the book. So the three of us have read it, and everybody who's signed on to listen to this, I hope you've read it too. So for anyone who is not aware, Liz Talley is the USA Today bestselling author of over 30 heartwarming stories, a finalist in both RWA's Golden Heart and Rita Awards. Liz makes her home in Louisiana, where she likes to read, volunteer, and avoid housework. A girl after my own heart. Her stories are set mostly in the South, where the tea is sweet, the summers are hot, and the porches are wide. Here, you are in the right place, Liz Talley, as we all know. And of course, Grace Green, our friend from several discussion back, and also one of our Book of the Month authors. Y'all, I'm going to stammer today. I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm going to stammer today more than I normally do.
We're fine with
There's
it.
a lot going on in my world, but everybody knows and loves Grace. So welcome back, Grace. Welcome back, Liz. And so, Liz, for those of us who maybe just this is the first novel they've read of yours, let's give them a little bit more background. So you make your home in Louisiana. Is that
Right.
where you're originally from? Who are your people?
Okay. Well, yes, I'm pretty much a Louisiana girl. I was not born in Louisiana. I was actually born in Pennsylvania. I know, shocking. I'm the Yankee of the family. That's what they like to call me. But both my parents and all my grandparents all came from the same small town, Louisiana. It's called Minden, Louisiana, and it's right outside of Shreveport, where I currently live, which is in the northwest corner of Louisiana. So my dad had a job up there, and I just happened to be born there. And then he quit the job because he missed home, and then they came back. So I only lived there for about a year. So I was a Yankee for a year. But I'm pretty much a Southern girl, Louisiana girl. And for my journey, as far as publishing is concerned, I started as a teacher. I was an English teacher for many years, and then I taught adult education. I taught the GED prep and help kids that struggled in school get their GED so they could go on and do other things. And then one day I started writing, and I started writing in romance. So I wrote for Harlequin. I did about 15 books for Harlequin. I wrote for a line that was called Super Romance, which is basically like a single title within a category. So those were the same books that you would buy once a month at the grocery store. But the Super Romance were as their name indicates, a little bit bigger book. So I was writing like a regular single title. No, like a lot of the genre, like Harlequins are like, it might be like Greek magnets, and that would be the presents line. That's the girls who's a secretary falls in love with a billionaire, kind of billionaire romance. And then there's like the Western ones, and those would be like the Americans. And then they had all these different categories. Mine were just could be anything. So I wrote pretty much single title within a category line. I did that for a while, and then I went on and started writing for Montlake. I wrote 2 romances for Montlake. And as we were talking before we started live, this particular book, which is Come Home to Me, was really not a romance. I mean, it kind of is, because there is romance in the book, but a lot of this was a healing journey for really all 3 of these characters in some ways. Not so much Hunter. He didn't really have healing to do. He just had healing to give. But for Rhett and Summer, it was a book of healing. And of course, there was some romance in it. But it was a little one-off for me. And but I liked it. I liked writing this kind of book. So I've kind of continued that in the successive books.
I really, really enjoyed this book. So we're going to do a ping pong thing. So I asked the
Okay.
first one. Grace is going to ask you a question. This way, hopefully, we won't be stepping on each other or whatever. But
Sure.
I do want to come back to that. But Grace, your turn.
Oh,
Tag, you're it, Grace.
so I'm going to disagree with you, Amy. I thought Hunt had quite an arc. He started out being really
Oh, yes. Well, he
oblivious,
does have an arc. That
a product of his family and a lot of the culture, and didn't really
right.
understand what he did wrong. And I loved the way,
No.
spoiler, don't listen, people. I loved the way his original error, okay,
Hmm.
ended up being what enlightened him.
Right. Right.
Because
Um,
all that Summer did in raising this child was to not hold grudges, to not bear ill will, to be a loving person and a kind
right.
person and a anyway, and he came to love this child, and through this child, the episode at the ball
Right.
field, he
Yes.
actually finally got it.
He finally
Finally
got
got
it.
it.
I
So,
actually agree with Grace. I think
yeah.
of all the characters in the book,
Oh, he
Hunt
had a big
had,
arc. It just wasn't romantic. It was
right,
just
but
an
No, no,
arc.
he
you're
Yeah.
had,
right.
Yeah.
but
Yes,
I think he
but
had the
I was
most growth.
afraid.
I think that
Mm.
character actually
Yes.
showed the most growth of all of them because he
Oh,
started
yeah.
out being, a total jerk and ended up being, kind of a guy that, you weren't too sorry was dating the pretty kindergarten teacher or whatever,
Yeah, yeah. Well, he
you
was a
know,
product of
and
his
he
raising.
was in
I
a
mean,
good place.
we've talked about, I mean, we talk about that in the South, being a product of your raising, how
Right,
you were raised. He was raised by parents who taught him to be entitled
right,
and taught him that he was never wrong, and they fixed the path for him. And so constantly he was bailed out, and he didn't have a great relationship with his father. It was very contentious. His father put a ton of
Mm-hmm.
pressure on him. And so we've all known kids like that. We've
right,
seen them. Hunt was a baseball player, and he was very good, but he was pressed by his father to be even better. And then he had a lot of money, and his parents liked having a lot of money and liked having a lot of power in that town. And they used their power, and they taught Hunt to use his power, that he was powerful. He was more important than the other person across the table from him. So
right,
when he and Summer, he felt like Summer was a charity date, right?
right.
Mm-hmm.
So climbing into the book, I never intended to write a book that was really about date rape, but it was a topic. My boys were growing up, so I had a boy. This came out in 2018. My son Jake graduated high school in 2017 and was going to college, and so it was a very important topic for me because I wanted him to understand how to deal with females in college, and I wanted him to understand what consent was, because I do not kid myself that my child is some angel that was going to remain a virgin until his marriage. I knew he was a regular guy. He was a baseball player. He liked to hunt and fish, and he was in a fraternity. And so I wanted to be very open and honest with a conversation on consent and the troubles you can run into as a college guy. So when I was writing this book, I really don't the opening chapter with Rhett was my initial idea for the book. It was based on a true story, an accident that I saw when I was driving to work one day that just imprinted in my brain because it was a man who had struck a child who had chased a ball in the road.
And I
Um,
have to tell you, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's the
that's
question
okay.
that
That's okay.
I have. I mean, that was so brave of you to use that. I
Yes.
mean, were you nervous about opening the book with
Mm-hmm.
the death of a child?
Yes, because it was a very dramatic, but I really needed Rhett to be at a point, to be this sunshiny, life is perfect. His career, I mean, everything has been
Mm-hmm.
sunshine for Rhett Bryan his entire life. I mean, he's good looking and everyone likes him. And he really is a good guy. He's a great guy. And he's had incredible success in Hollywood as a talk show host. And everything's coming up roses. And I needed something bad to happen to him to bring him back home, to make him question everything he ever thought about himself. And so, even though it was an accident, it shook him to his core, as it would anyone. And
Right.
The accident that I saw, I of course did not see the accident. I came by in the aftermath and I learned about it. It was on a highway that I traveled, and it was just a child that was going out there playing ball, waiting at the bus stop, just like in the book. And the man who, and I just, the only image I saw is I looked in my rearview mirror as we passed. It was all roped off. You couldn't see anything because it was a horrific accident. And the man was sitting on the back of the ambulance, and he was had his head and his hands between his knees. And that image of that grief of that man, I mean, he did nothing wrong. He was just driving to work. But the grief, that he felt, I just kept thinking, what does that feel like? Um, there's nothing he could have done, nothing he could have done. And so I use that as my inciting incident for this book to bring Rhett to a point where he just pretty much has a breakdown.
Right.
He realizes,
Mhm.
what's really important in life. And so yeah, I needed that for him. So I did. That was my first initial thought for this book. But then I didn't expect that. But I think it came from conversations with my son. I was like, what does it mean to give consent? And just because you're drunk, does that give like we had those hard conversations. And then I just kept thinking, what if something like that happened and the guy never knew the pain he caused? He was oblivious. He thought he was entitled to take what he took, that she wanted it, that she was into it, and that she was just scared. And then, of course, when she gets pregnant, that was her excuse, to tell her
Mhm.
parents that had happened to her. I wanted him to be totally, totally oblivious to the fact that he had raped someone. So, yeah, it was a very, but here's the deal with this book. This book is probably my book that I have the most male readers on. I think it's because I have two male viewpoints. So if you're a male reader and you tend to read fiction that involves even romance or women's fiction, or which is a broad umbrella, but any kind of fiction that deals with, this sort of thing, I think, they like it a little bit more because it does have two male viewpoints.
Mhm.
And so that's something I feel like I write fairly well because I grew up with two brothers and I have two sons, and there are no girls in, in my family. So I understand male point of view fairly well.
And to you, Grace.
You know, I actually was really, the whole book I'm reading and I'm thinking, who's Summer going to end up with?
Yeah.
Is it going to be Rhett? Could it be Hunt? I'm like, no, she wouldn't do that. Must be Rhett, but she might. And
Yeah.
I'm like, it would felt to me like you could have pulled it off in that they both had growth. He apologizes, maybe there's feelings, but it would have felt wrong.
Too
It would
pat,
have
maybe.
felt,
Maybe a little pat.
yeah, a little
Well,
too much.
yeah,
And
I really just wanted it to be for his arc. I mean, his arc is, you're right, it's pretty profound. This is a guy that has shirked duty most of his life, shirked
mhm,
responsibility, always passed it out off as someone else's mistake. Y'all have probably all known people like this in your life, right? You are people,
mhm.
maybe someone else's brother or kid or whatever, and you're like, well, they never took responsibility their entire life for anything. It's always somebody else's problem. So I wanted him to have this enormous growth arc. He needed to, and he needed to realize what he had done. But also, it's not just about his growth as realizing what he had done to Summer, but also learning what it is to be a father. And so the book is learning how to not just take responsibility for your actions, but your parenting and what you teach your child. And David was able to actually teach his father. So Susan
Mhm.
mentioned that, at a certain point in the book, it's really toward the end when he overhears his son. He's trying to sneak down and watch his son practice pitching. He's very proud that his son's doing something that he did. It's a connection for him. Baseball is a connection for Hunt. And so he's trying to sneak down there and watch him. And instead, he overhears this conversation with these boys talking about the
Mhm.
party. And in the course of the
Right.
book, David makes some mistakes, and he goes to a party and he gets drunk, really, really drunk, and they have to take him to the hospital. It's like, one of those things that you hear about with these kids these days, where you're like, oh my goodness. But David made some bad decisions and drank at a party and got really sick. And so he is hearing him talk about this party and what went on after they had to take, David to the hospital. This between a boy and a girl,
Mhm.
and this girl was really drunk, and he, hit it, and they're talking about that. And David basically sets the record straight on what date rape is and what
Mhm.
consent is. And he tells his boys, you can go to jail for doing that. And Hunt's hearing this, and he's like, what? And he starts Googling on his phone. I don't think it ever crossed Hunt's mind to Google what date rape was, to understand what consent was. He thought he knew. He didn't think he did anything wrong. So it's about parenting. And he realizes his son knows more about that than he does. He learned from David. So I really like the aspect that it's a lot about parenting and the decisions parents make. I dealt with that too, because that's where I was when I was writing this book. I had kids that were in high school. My
Oh,
son was going to college. My other was a sophomore. So I had two boys navigating parties and drinking and consent.
so we've talked a lot about the guys in this
Hmm.
book, and of course, we haven't touched much on Summer at all. Tell us
Right.
about Summer. What was the genesis of this character, and what did you see her journey as? Because she seemed to have her act together much earlier than the guys, and that, of course, is
Yeah.
fairly
I
common.
think that's typical of women.
Yeah, yeah.
We always have our acts together before the guys. No, I think Summer was a very mature character from the very beginning. I envisioned her as a girl. I mean, I feel a little bit like Summer was, in high school, when I was always a little plump, always a little on that outer edge. For a while I was on kind of the outer edge. I kind of, wasn't like super popular, but I was friends with popular girls. And I mean, I kind of crept in high school and made my way. After a while, you stop caring about it. You just are who you are. But when you're kind of in junior high and early part of your high school career, you're trying to figure out, who am I as a person? And at that particular time, I was kind of plump. I was more of a size 12, size 14, which is kind of where I am now. But it was my little baby fat. I developed a little bit later. I did, and so I was a little plump and a little awkward, and I was a book nerd, and I was smart, and so it was a little bit of Summer. And I liked her as a girl because I think she just was so in love with Rhett. She was in love with this very popular, very good looking, and very nice. Like Rhett was nice to her. I loved that about him. He wasn't like some unattainable God. He was like a very nice person. And so she fell in love with him, not because he was just beautiful to look at or really accomplished, but because he was a kind person. He was really nice. I think Grampy Pete raised him to be a nice guy, and was expected to be a Southern gentleman. I mean, he had the name Rhett after all, which of course I chose that name because I was like, that's the quintessential
Yes.
Southern dude name, right? I mean, to be Rhett. So I couldn't name him Ashley, but he was kind of like Ashley with the name of Rhett. He was the nice, um, nice guy. But anyway, I think Summer had it together, and I think when she got pregnant and realized she was pregnant, I think that was really hard. But I think she didn't really hesitate a whole lot that she was going to keep the baby, because to her that was part of her background as far as her faith. I think she was raised in a family where she went to church and she had a certain set of faith values that never crossed her mind. But I also think she wanted to pursue her dreams, and I think she gave it a shot. But she's very practical. And when her son needed something more, her son came first. And so she began to question on whether she was ever going to make it in Nashville. I think she thought she was good enough. But, like all of us as authors, I mean, how many authors have you met that have like great books? And, after a while, they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and nothing ever works out. And so I didn't want Summer to quite give up on that dream. I wanted her still pursuing her music. So she still taught music lessons for money, and then she was still playing like in a band, right? She was still doing her music, but just in a more subdued, controlled way, so that she was there for her child. So I think she's a lot of mothers out there. She's being a mother first and then just kind of waiting. But I don't think she gave up. I don't think, I like to think that Southern Summer was just kind of, let me just wait a little while. Let me do this for David because he needs this. He needs a father figure. He needs something that I can't give him as a woman. So let me do that for a little while. So.
Your turn, Grace.
I thought Summer was a really strong character. I liked her very much. I liked how she made her decisions.
Mm-hmm.
She tried to do the one thing until her son was demonstrating that he was really having some issues. And then she did what she needed to do. And she took him back home to Moonlight.
I think to me, she was kind of, I know this sounds kind of weird, but she's like every woman. I feel like we all kind of do that. It's very rare to find a woman. I mean, there are women that will pursue what they want and their dreams to the detriment of everyone else that they, they love. But I don't think Summer was that. And I think that's why she's extremely relatable, because I think we as women, we tend to, which kind of leads me into like kind of what I'm writing right now, because Summer was kind of where I was back in 2018. Now we're 5 or 6 years later and my kids are gone. And now I'm like, okay, what next? I was telling, we're doing a little movie thing and I was working with the director and she said, how would you categorize this? It's not like a coming of age story. So many coming of age stories. I'm like, it's coming of middle age. Because what happens is, I know it's kind of funny, but I'm like, I really think it's a thing. You get your kids raised and they feel, somewhat secure. I mean, like you're never really truly done raising your kids, but you kind of get them and you're like, okay, well, what next? Who am I? And I think that's why, a lot of women find, new hobbies. Maybe they start writing, maybe they start painting, maybe they start, whatever they do, volunteering, maybe going back to work, because, you need something more. And so, I was where Summer was. I was trying to raise my boys to be strong men and make good decisions. And, our conversations were about drinking and sex and getting your homework done and making good decisions and, do your Bible study. I mean, just all the things that we try to do as parents. And then all of a sudden they're gone and that's over. I'm not really over, but you know what I mean. It's over.
And, they'll be back.
Yeah. No, don't say that. I'm trying to keep them out. Yeah. So we'll see what my next books reflect.
So, okay, I have a question.
Sure.
Now, I love this book. It was a great book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But did you think about when you're getting to the end of the book? I mean, so I understand, Rhett is still all confused and he hasn't had his moment of truth with the family of the little girl and all that. And
Right.
So he basically picks a fight and then he goes back to California and then he goes through this thing and he gets himself straight and he's in a good place.
Right.
It bothered me a little bit, if I'm honest, that he didn't then come back and I wanted him to make the grand gesture. Did you think about having him come back?
I did.
Summer deserved that. Summer deserved
I
somebody.
just wrestled with it. How was I going to do it? And I think what I basically came down to for me is that all throughout her life, Summer wanted Rhett.
Yeah.
And she never put it out there. She never rolled the dice and said, I'm worthy. I'm going to chase you. She kind of waited. She waited for life to happen to her because that sounds bad. But she kind of did. She kind of waited for like whatever life gave her. She just kind of took,
I don't know.
And
she laid one on him at the prom.
She did. I think there was a girl inside Summer fighting to get out, right? Like all of us. I think she did take a chance. So you're right. She did take a chance and she was rejected. So I don't know. I wrestled with it a lot. I talked with my editor a lot on it because I was like, okay, maybe he comes back and maybe he surprises her. But he did kind of give her that gift. He kind of went
Yeah.
behind and took that song and,
Yeah.
did a little something for her. I think he thought that he was giving her a gift, and perhaps, I don't want to say maybe she didn't want him, but maybe it was, sleeping dogs lie for Rhett. Like, let me do this one thing for Summer. Let me give her what no one else has ever really given her, which is a shot, a shot. And I don't know, like, that was hard. I went back and forth on it a lot. I maybe even wrote it where he came back. But it was kind of a conversation we had with the editor. I kind of wanted her just to kind of, I don't know, just go for it. Just
Yeah.
put it out there and be like, here I am. This is what I want. I figured it out. And she kind of was hard on him too, if you think about it. She was like, you had part of this. And, she didn't hold back on him. And I think Rhett really had to work through some stuff before he could be even ready to be with her or be worthy of her. I think he had to work through some stuff too. So yeah, it was kind of hard to decide how to end it. I don't know about y'all, but that's always hard for me in a romance. Who's going to make the move? Who's going to be the person that gives in? Who's going to do the grand gesture? It's always hard for me to decide.
Yeah.
So I liked how you did that, by the way, because it resonates with where the majority of their life will be going forward from there.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I, do y'all
But,
think? I don't know. I kind of felt like Summer was a little scared.
oh
She
yeah.
kind of lived a little scared, right? And I didn't want her to. I wanted her to be not scared at the end. I wanted her to be like, I'm going for it.
But
I'm
didn't
worth
you do
it.
that
Yeah.
for all of them, Liz? So you gave
Yeah.
Rhett something, I'm not sure what, but he got something. He got growth out of it. Summer got more confidence in putting herself out there and taking a risk. And Hunt, finally, for maybe the first time in his life, actually believed maybe he could be a good father.
Yeah, I think
Well, and he
I
took
really think he'd be better.
responsibility.
And really, I think for Rhett had to see a version of himself that was true, not a
Right.
version of himself that was made for the camera.
Right.
And so I think for him, he had to be true. And when Summer called him out on allowing that PR company to wreck that family, to tear that family apart so he could look better, so his image was better, I think she called him out on, who are you really? This is who you profess to be, but who are you really? And so for Rhett, he had to learn who he truly was, So anyway, I mean, he is a nice guy, and the accident was truly an accident, but what are you culpable for if you're allowing somebody to tear a family down and try to shift blame so that you don't look so bad? And she kind of hammered that home for him.
Right. And it's a sticky situation because obviously in this situation, that family, they weren't the gold digger types or whatever, but that could have been the case. So, and he didn't really
Yeah.
know until he went and met them face to face and
Right.
had that moment with them,
Which was, I loved writing that scene because to me that was so real. Seeing that family, seeing their grief. That was a hard scene to write. And I think again for Rhett, it was like sheer breakdown, right? Just sheer overwhelming that he took a life. He didn't mean to, but there it was.
Right.
His car hit a little girl and killed her, and the repercussion, the ripples of that. And I think it really just stripped away all the veneer that Rhett had down to the rawness of who he was. So that was a hard scene to write. It was a lot of hard scenes to write in this book. Very hard. I cried a lot in it. And
this book dealt with several very big topics. I mean, it was not, and I think I mentioned to you before, when we talked about doing this book, I knew it was one of your earlier books, and I didn't really go back and see when it was written. And so somewhere in my head, I thought it was a romance. And so, and it is in some respects, but it's a much bigger book than a romance. It deals with tough issues, and it's really more in the wheelhouse of women's fiction than romance. And so I was a little bit surprised by that, but it
Yeah.
does deal with some very difficult topics. And I think you did a wonderful job of
Well,
dealing with
thank you.
all of them. I mean,
I've been told that I handle difficult topics well. Maybe I miss my calling as a therapist or something. I don't know. I think we're as writers, we're kind of therapists, right? We're like
yeah.
figuring everything out. I always tell my kids, I'm like, I'm a good person to talk to because, I just make up characters with their problems and solve them myself. So I think I'm pretty good at solving
It's
problems.
a good skill set for
It's a
authors
good
to have,
skill
I think.
set.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've done that a couple of times. There's a book called Adulting that also has some very serious topics like drug abuse, suicide, and sexual assault. Just those fun things. And so I tend to, but here's the deal. In life, I tend to have a light touch in dealing with heavy topics. Um, I don't appreciate having my emotions jerked around constantly in a book. Y'all have read books where you're like, okay, they just did that on purpose. Okay, I'm not going to say the person who does that, but very popular male writer who writes romance. And it's very much pull the strings and just torture you. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't want to torture my readers. I want my readers to
I
gain
appreciate that.
insight. And I want them
That's how I felt when I read your book.
Yeah,
a little bit of like, a little bit
Dang
of
it,
like, yeah.
Grace, don't say that.
No, because when we were talking before, and I think it's because of the story, the parts of the stuff in the story, the characters. Maybe you're just that great with characters. But I had something happen that has never happened to me before when I was reading a book. And last night, Grampy Pete came to visit me in my dreams. Why Grampy Pete? I was in the middle, it was some kind of dream. And I often will remember my dreams, especially if I'm not awakened in the middle of them. But there were a bunch of people in the dream. I think Summer, Rhett, and Hunt may have been there, but there were a number of people in the dream. I don't remember what we were doing or what was going on, because I saw this older man sitting in this chair over kind of in the corner. He looked really kind of disgruntled.
Yeah.
And I said something about, who's that? And he says, well, I'm Pete. And I said,
were you talking over the football game?
No. And he said, Grampy Pete.
Grampy Pete.
I can see
and
him.
I'm like, I was so shocked. I said, this is book? And I went, oh no. And I woke up and that was it. So I lost all the context around that. I don't know how he ended up in my dream, but I was quite shocked because he was not invited.
That's interesting.
That's bizarre. I would not be a bit surprised if you said you dreamed about Red. But Grampy Pete,
Grampy
I mean,
Pete.
Well, Grampy Pete was there.
That's interesting.
He has good advice. And he could be fussing at you for standing in front of the TV or talking during the ball game or not picking up after yourself.
There were people there, so maybe he was annoyed about the people kind of milling around and chatting or something. But I think that's a testament to whatever it is, whether it's the characterization or the story or just the vivid way you have of writing and jerking people around emotionally.
Jerking people around. Well, I don't like I don't mind jerking emotions. I just don't want to emotionally manipulate all the time.
Right.
I do not like emotional manipulation. Something sad just so it makes you cry. Right. And I dislike when an author does that. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be very authentic. I wanted all the emotions that Rhett felt to be very authentic. I wanted Summer and Hunt, I wanted that. So I guess I shouldn't say that, but I find that I do that. I do okay with writing books like that, that deal with hard subjects, but then I don't just take a knife and dig around in it. I let it be what it is, to influence growth. And so like I've done it in this book, I've done it in Adulting, in Wedding War, which is the one that I just did the movie short for. Like we actually wrote a screenplay that we took a chapter of that book, and we've made it into a film, and we're entering festivals with it. And so
nice.
So that's really fun. But that one was on like friendship reconciliation with a really hard thing that one of my characters did to the other character. It's a story of forgiveness. So I like taking those serious, hard things that we deal with in life that people have to overcome, but also give a light touch because that's how life is. We don't all just live, as Eeyores under a cloud. We have moments of a cloud and moments of sun, and I want my books to reflect life. So I don't want them to all be, so serious and so, I like the trade-off. I always say I try to write
You
still
don't want to
magnolias.
write you don't want to write melodrama or
Right. I don't want to write
cliched scenes.
exactly. I
Right.
want to write still magnolias, still the epitome of a female
Mm-hmm.
story for me. You laugh at the funny characters. They're great characters, great cast, but the subject matter is serious.
Right.
So, as Dolly Parton says in that, laughter through tears is my favorite emotion. So I'm always like going, through that. I want to mind those emotions, but also give you some laughter too. And Grampy Pete provides some of that.
He was a hoot, indeed.
Yeah.
All right, so you just had a new release. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I had wanted to do that for the Cricket Crosby series. I wrote Deconstructed and I visited with y'all about Deconstructed. Didn't plan on making that a series, but readers really liked it. And I thought, you know what? Cricket's at a point where I want to see what she's going to do too. So I wrote If the Dress Fits, which was the follow-up for Deconstructed. And then at the very end of August, I released Hanging by a Thread. And it just felt too close to September. I didn't want
Right.
everybody to have to scramble to get the book, but it was really fun. Cricket basically in that book is going undercover at a retirement center and a retirement community, let's say a retirement community. And there's someone who wants to kill this nasty old woman named Annabelle Dilworth. She's very wealthy and very nasty. And she keeps getting attempts on her life. Cricket's not sure if it's real or not. And so, yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a cozy mystery with a little bit of panache, like Cricket has. It's fun. I mean, people are liking it. I'm happy to write those light, fun books. It's totally not the opposite of this, but it's pretty close to being opposite. This is more serious and it's set in the Lowcountry, which I know that was one of the questions is where was this set?
Yes.
And one of the readers, she knew exactly where it was.
Right.
So
Okay. So
she knew
let's
where it
go
was.
back to that because you know what?
Yeah.
I don't have my act together today at all, and I actually did skip over that question. So tell us about the setting. Was
Yeah.
Moonlight based on a specific place?
Yes, it is. First of all, on this cover, when I first got my first cover, you see where they have this driftwood right here? They
Mhm.
had big giant rocks.
Oh dear.
And when I got it, I said, have y'all been to South Carolina? It's like,
Probably not.
rocks. There are no rocks on the beaches there. So I said, but there is a lot of driftwood. So I said, if you could put like a big piece of driftwood, because I think they were trying to balance the cover. I was like, So
Mhm.
the cover came out really pretty once
It's
they
beautiful.
fixed it. I was like, that's in California, but this is in the Lowcountry of South Carolina. The Moonlight is based on Beaufort, South Carolina. So I lived in Beaufort for a year and I've gone back to visit it a couple of times. And I think one of the readers asked me why I didn't just make it Beaufort. Like, why did you make it Moonlight instead of Beaufort? And the reason is because it had been a while since I had lived there. And I didn't want to get the details wrong. And I went back to visit, but a lot had changed when I went back to visit. A lot of businesses that I had frequented were gone. And I just felt it would be better just to make it fictional, but based on Beaufort. But
Right.
I loved living there. I loved living on the coast. I did not fictionalize Hunting Island. Summer and David, when it opens, they're out at Hunting Island, which is a state park past Fripp. That my husband and I used to go to, and I loved it. There's a lighthouse there, and it's just a beautiful area, very tropical looking.
I've been there.
Oh, have you been there? Isn't it?
I've been there. I love it. It's gorgeous. And actually,
It is.
for a while, we owned an Airstream. Actually, we've had two of them, and we had so much fun. And we went one year after Christmas for 2 weeks to Hunting Island and stayed. I mean, literally on the
cool.
beach. I mean, it's like it was like we had beachfront parking spots, which are really hard to get. At that
Yes,
time
that
of
is
year, it
cool.
wasn't very crowded because, it's still cold in
Right,
the end
right.
of December and the beginning of January. We didn't care because we were right on the beach. We went with
Uh,
friends. There were like 3 of us, and we had New Year's Eve and New Year's Day right there, on the
oh, that's
beach.
so
It was
cool.
magical. It was so
Oh,
much fun.
I'm so jealous. I love that area. And it's so cool because it looks like no other beach to me. It's very tropical looking in the middle. I mean, South Carolina's beautiful marsh and there's a lot, but on Hunting Island, in fact, I think they filmed some of Forrest Gump there, some of those scenes
Mhm.
that they had in Forrest Gump, like that was supposed to be like Vietnam and stuff. I think they did some there, and they did G.I. Jane there. Remember that movie with
Mm-hmm.
Demi Moore, where she's
Yep.
the going out. I think they filmed some of that. It looks very tropical because there's a lot of palm trees and
Mhm.
I don't know. It just is a really beautiful beach to me. It's a little different than any other beach I've been to. So I really like it.
Okay, so we covered your new
Yes.
release. What's next for you?
Oh my goodness, Susan. I wish I knew. I'm writing like 3 different books right now. Really, I don't think I'm going to go back to writing romance. I really love writing. I loved writing the cozy mystery. I love writing Cricket. She's fun to write. I wouldn't say she's easy to write, but it fills me with a lot of joy writing her stories. Her and Ruby are just fun. But right now I'm flirting with a book that's a women's fiction. I just finished the first 75 pages. I want my agent to take it out on submission, so I'm still doing some indie publishing, but I'm still kind of interested. I would love to have a book that I don't know, just I like balancing both. I mean, I don't know if it's a good
Mhm.
idea or not, but my agent's going to maybe try to shop it around. We'll see. But it really is true women's fiction, not a lot of romance. There's a little bit of a Lucy Foley type feel to it. It's a lot of people that don't know who each other are and why they're there, why they're at this particular house in the bayou, and so there's a little bit of a little mystery. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I just come up with an idea and write. I mean, I don't think I'm as smart as you ladies.
Oh, I think that's a stretch. I think you're pretty
I don't
smart.
know. I don't know what is it okay to say on something that you don't know what you're doing? I mean, I
It
probably
is.
shouldn't I probably
Totally.
shouldn't admit that.
That's why you like women's fiction because it's so
Yeah.
flexible.
It
Right.
really is,
It
Grace. It
covers
is.
pretty much anything as long as you are focused on her journey,
Journey. Yes.
then
Yes.
you can put pretty much anything in there. And I think that is the joy of
Yeah.
women's fiction.
Well, this one had a dual timeline. So the one I'm writing right now has a dual timeline. My one of I have 2 main characters, but the main character, I have a timeline in the past and the timeline in the present. And she disappeared during Hurricane Betsy, and everyone thought she was dead, but she wasn't. She let her whole family believe she was dead.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that's kind of like one of the hooks of it is I go back to 1965 to Hurricane Betsy, which came through up Bayou Lafourche, which is where my family lived, into New Orleans. And it was the first, they called her $1 billion Betsy because she was the first $1 billion hurricane.
Oh, wow.
And so she killed 81 people, and
Mm.
everyone assumed that my character, Rosalie, was killed, but she wasn't. She became someone new.
Wow.
So I'm having fun.
Sounds
Like, doesn't that fit?
fascinating.
Yeah, it sounds
Yes.
intriguing, right? So I'm loving writing it. I have a dual timeline, and I am a sucker for a dual timeline. Put me back in the past, and so we'll see. Maybe somebody will want it.
I'm sure they
Pretty
will.
please.
I'm
Well, you have
sure
to keep
readers will
posted.
want it. As to who they
Yeah,
use
I
to
hope
get it
so.
through, that's a different
That's
different
right.
thing.
Well, the good news, Grace, is I can always do it myself and bring it to my
That's
readers. And
exactly
that's what I
right.
love about
Yep.
publishing now, because we're not ever going to have to put it under our bed and never look at it again. We
Yeah.
get to actually, control our own destiny. It's kind of nice.
That's right.
Readers will
That's
want that
exactly
book
right.
regardless of how it's published. So, I
Yeah,
hope it works out however you want
me
it to
too.
work out, but I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, well, one way or the other. I think it might be my next book, one way or the other. I know a lot of my readers, they really want another Cricket book. So I've been bombarded with that. But I think Cricket, she might need a little time. She and
Right.
Griff might need a little time, and then maybe I'll bring them back. So kind of have an idea for a cruise story. I'd like a mystery cruise and cricket on a mystery cruise. So
Well, that sounds fun.
yeah, I think that'd
All
be
Well,
right.
fun.
there's a lot of elderly people on cruises, so you can have the home take a cruise.
That's right. That's
There
right.
you go. There you
I
go.
just thought that'd be fun. I just kept thinking about cricket on a cruise.
And
That amuses
that's so
me.
alliterate too. And so you've got some
Cricket on a
alliteration
cruise.
going in there too.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, she's gonna have the big hat and the sunglasses. I know that. So
Yeah. It sounds great. I can't
yeah,
wait
it
to
does.
read it. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
doing this.
Oh,
Thank
it
you
was
both
fun.
for
I
being here
love
today.
visiting with y'all always.
I enjoy this so much when the three of us get to do this. And
Yeah,
so
it's so much
we
fun.
have to do it again soon.
I love you girls. Y'all are so
Oh,
great. Thank you for
you.
letting me come and talk about my book, even though
Thanks
it's an
for a
old
wonderful
book.
book.
It's a great book. Anytime. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Y'all take care and we will do this
Yeah.
again soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you all for choosing it and reading it. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.